welcome to another edition of What It Takes on Blue Ridge PBS and the Echo Channel, where each week we talk to leaders and changemakers in the Blue Ridge PBS region. My guest this week is still relatively new to our mountains. Dr. Bret Danilowicz took over as the 8th President of Radford University in July of this year, having previously served as the Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, and he's quickly making his presence known in the region. Welcome, President Danilowicz.
Tom, thank you for having me here, and also you are welcome to call me Bret.
I appreciate that.
I think that's a little easier.
I do. Well, as a graduate of Radford, I actually attended 2 different times, once to get a teaching certificate and once to get a master's degree. I'm really glad to have this time to sit down and talk to you. So you're new to the region. I know you're introducing yourself to people all the time. How did you end up where you are now as the college president at Radford?
Tom, 2 parts to that. One is my wife and I decided about 16 years ago that we would like to end up as a first couple at an institution. So part of the movement through time has been learning the skills necessary to be a president, trying new institutions on, placing myself purposefully into discomfort to know what it's going to be like to be a president someday. The second part is Radford. So my wife and I have always lived in small towns together until our most recent move to South Florida. And one of the things we learned is that South Florida is lovely, but 8.5 million people as neighbors is just a little too crowded. It's not small town, so Radford is a perfect fit community-wise for us.
Sure. As you know, when you set the intention of becoming a college president, it makes me curious. What kind of student were you? What was your own learning process like?
Everybody has different stories. Mine, I was inspired at a very early age to go into research. And so I wanted to be a marine biologist. You know, I went through that. I want to be a police officer or the fireman, you know, the usual things. But early on, probably about the age of 10, I had made my decision that I wanted to be a marine biologist and a researcher. Kudos to Jacques Cousteau and, you know, accessibility to the environment through the television. But the way I was as a student is I tended to be the student that blew the curve for the rest of the class. I was that person, and so I studied, I went out of my way to learn, and I actually skipped my senior year of high school to start university early. And again, just learning more. It wasn't about beating other students, it was about learning more. So yeah, I was that kid.
All right, I was not that kid.
Okay.
So, we've got both ends of the curve here. Sure. That's great. And you know, do you remember teachers or anything that were especially inspiring to you besides Jacques Cousteau, who I think taught all of us?
I remember one of my teachers in 5th grade, Mr. Gill, and what was fascinating is he taught us the economy through hands-on work. And we got little tokens each week that we could use to bid for sodas or candies. And what people like me learned is if we bought early in the season, we got things cheap. By the end, it was very expensive when there was a lot of currency in the system. Right. He was wonderful. He was one of those people that was just naturally gifted in making us feel welcome in the class, but also because it was hands-on, it has stuck with me to this day.
So you've arrived here in our beautiful mountains from sunny Florida. What were some of the things that sort of struck you when you first came here to interview or to visit the community? What opened your eyes about our neck of the woods?
One of the wonderful things is it took maybe a 2-minute drive to suddenly be in the hills and mountains. So Kay and I are very outdoorsy people. We bike ride, we kayak, we hike, we run. And so to be that close where you can just be immersed in nature's beauty, so to speak, it's striking how quickly you could get out of the town and into that environment. I think the other piece of it is that in coming into town, it wasn't, I think, our second visit, and we already recognized people on the street that we had met the first time around. And again, when you're living with 8 million people, you are very anonymous. And we like being able to know who's at the coffee shop, who's at the local restaurant serving with us. So that just resonated with us immediately.
And I joke now that, you know, I'll meet somebody in Roanoke. I've been here a long time now. Yeah. Not from here originally, but I've been here a long time. And you do meet somebody at a party or somewhere else, and then all of a sudden you see that person everywhere. It's like, oh, you've always been in my vision. Sure. I just didn't know who you were.
Sure.
Right?
And once you make that connection, it's somewhat for life. once you get to know that person.
Right.
Yep.
Having spent a fair amount of time in Radford, I have kind of watched, and we'll talk about the university here, but the town itself is has always seemed to me a little stuck in time. Like,
Sure.
you know, it hasn't changed as dramatically as some of the other communities around it, Blacksburg especially,
Yes.
but Roanoke here as well. I know that I've read stories about you talking about the connection between the town and you know, the city and the
Yes.
university. How do you think Radford is doing, the university, in terms of connecting with the community itself?
Like every institution, and even if we're talking about Blacksburg, there's always more work to do, right? So for Radford City and Pulaski County, and I've learned to pronounce Pulaski
That's
right.
very
I
good.
think I've got it. Okay, Montgomery County. You know, with the groups that are around us, you know, it's my belief that through time, more and more institutions have partnered purposefully with their counties and cities for economic development, and I think there's more opportunities for Radford University to take with its region. When you ask about how we're doing, again, the opportunity is for better co-planning, better purposeful planning about the future. I mean, I'll give you an example. I've learned coming in the Commonwealth that the cities separate from the counties. So that's new to me, okay? But that also creates a housing constraint in times. As employers grow, it can be difficult to get the type of housing that one needs to fulfill the demands of employees and or students. So with our city, there's a difficulty for faculty and staff to get the housing that they would like. So there was an economic development study that showed greater than 80% of our employees live more than 10 miles from Radford City. And you know, from my perspective, when you have an employer in the ideal world, they have their mortgages going back right into that same community. They're doing their shopping for groceries, for food, right in that community, because then the flow of dollars really supports the development together. So one of the things that in working with the city and the counties together, longer term, is how do we plan to create those kind of entry-level housing opportunities right in the city or right in the area so people's dollars that are coming in through the university stay there. So that's just an example of where we can plan better into the future.
Sure, and congratulations on Pulaski. A couple others for you. You know, they're not as close, but Stanton instead of Staunton.
Didn't know that.
Univista instead of Buena Vista. There's a couple others that you just might surprise you when you say the name of a town and they look at you like you've got three heads. You're a college president. That's, you know, a very lofty position anywhere, I think, but I think especially in a community and university like Radford, you become a very important person very quickly in the community. You've studied about being a college president, obviously. There are roles that most people don't think about in terms of like, what are the most important things for you to do as a college president?
So the things that people don't think about is the most important thing is to build a strong leadership team, because I'm one person, but all the work really gets done by vice presidents and deans and other people at the institution. So having a strong leadership team takes a significant amount of time, and you have to work together to create kind of a unified philosophy and strategy. That takes an inordinate amount of time. Mm-hmm. The opposite side of that is the external side to the institution, and working with the legislature, with alumni like yourself. We may have an annual giving campaign coming up soon. I may be reaching out, Tom.
All right.
But the external side, where you're working with really the stakeholders or constituents outside the institution, also takes a lot of time. And both of them are really endless, they're bottomless pools of time. The more time you spend in each, the better you are. So becoming a president, it's this interesting balance about how do you spend sufficient time internally to make sure the institution is moving forward purposefully, and externally so people are aware and supportive of the moves that you're making. It's a delicate balance.
And then the group we haven't mentioned, and I know they're on your mind, but you've got students coming from all over the world.
And Tom, ultimately, the university serves the students. That is the purpose of most institutions. There are a lot of institutions that have like a mirrored research and I will say, entrepreneurship side, like Virginia Tech, University of Virginia. But most institutions are more like Radford University, where it's education. You know, when we work with the vice presidents and the deans, it's how do we make the journey for the student the most effective we can for the dollars that we have, right? And also, how do they carry that into their careers? You know, one of the things that's occurred in higher ed is, as we've democratized higher ed, we've created more access opportunities. How we teach, like my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Gill, how do we teach in a way that engages students and gives them lifelong learning? As our students change, so does the way that we optimize our teaching. So it's a constant relearning of who we need to be as an institution.
So when you talk about your students, I know you have a very diverse student body, but you know, what is kind of the profile of a Radford student? Is there one, or you know, what have you
Right.
found as you meet with your students and
Okay.
walk around campus and see what they look like and where they're from?
The one feature that is distinguishing among most, it's over 90% of our students come from within state. Okay, and it's actually closer to 98%. So we are primarily a Commonwealth serving institution. We do have international students, we have out-of-state students, but they are primarily from the Commonwealth. Everything else, there is no descriptor. We have many students from the Southwest. We also have many students from the East Coast in the northern part of Virginia. You know, 38% of our students are first generation. 38% of our students are Pell eligible. Those things do not entirely overlap, but there's no other descriptor for a Radford student except, I would say, the desire to learn.
And I know, you know, enrollment's always important, and yet you've come to a Commonwealth that has, you know, pretty well recognized, outstanding public colleges.
Yes.
I mean, everything from William and Mary to Longwood to you guys,
Yes.
to UVA to, you know, there's just so many. I know as the father of 2 children who went to state institutions in Virginia,
Sure.
you know, if you're mostly pulling from the state, and you've got this incredible competition of very good institutions that you don't
Yes.
probably want to think of as constant competition,
Right.
but again, how do you differentiate what's going on at Radford from some of the others?
Ultimately, if I can answer that one concisely, I've got a great book tour to take on the road and talk to others. That differentiation piece is critical. So, I mean, there's a couple things that are opportunities for us. We are surrounded by a wonderful environment and outdoor activities. When you go and look at how they nationally they consider these outdoor rankings, Appalachian State is usually identified as the #1 outdoor university. We have the same amenities, if not better, but we're not recognized for that. So that's an opportunity for distinction. Okay?
Right. Well, no, I was just actually when I asked that question, I'm thinking about Boone, and I'm thinking about Appalachian State, and you know, some of the, I think you're right. I think you're onto something, because you are not far from the Appalachian Trail. You've got a reservoir not far. You've got incredible mountain biking. I don't recall that being emphasized during my time at the campus.
And Tom, just this last Sunday, we sent our students tubing down the river together, targeting our new students to get them used to that. They've got this wonderful environment around them.
It goes right by the Dedman Center.
It does, absolutely, where they're going to be watching basketball games. So trying to make it more purposeful externally, that this is one of the reasons to come to the institution, and really to marry that into sustainability and the preservation of nature. There's some great combination that will be distinctive within the Commonwealth. I would say one of the other features that's also distinctive, because we don't have the specific research mission, it's not half of what we do, we focus entirely on our students. So we focus on student learning through career development into career placement. So all the faculty time that we have is focused on individual students. That's, again, it's not unique, but it's distinctive. So those are pieces that start developing a profile which is different for Radford University from the other schools in the Commonwealth. And how we capitalize on that and market that, again, that's my book tour. Okay, I'm not quite there yet.
Well, and given that a big part of your job is fundraising, clearly, of any university president, and that requires, you know, not all of the money that you're going to raise is within 50 miles of where you're raising it, I'm sure. How are you finding it a challenge already to kind of balance that? You want to stay present to your faculty, present to your students, and yet I'm sure you've got to spend a fair amount of time away.
Yeah, that balance between internal and external, 2 months into the job, right, and I'm still learning it. One of the things about Radford is there's a wonderful alumni network. We've got a wonderful individual, Laura Turk, who oversees that group, and they've set up something called the Tartan Tour. So they've got 38 spots around the state where I get the chance to pop in and visit with alumni. This year, I'm trying to be more focused internally. I need to get to know our students, our stories, our faculty members. Next year, it's going to be easier to turn more of my time externally. That said, there was Radford Day up at the Nationals ballpark, and there was over 500 alum that showed up for that. You know, we've got a series of these events, and hearing their stories, their passion for the university, it's also very exciting for me. So next year will be more development, but this year, again, getting to know people, the main communities that are in the main alumni centers that are supporting us is an important part of me, for me to learn about the institution as well.
Now you officially took over a couple months ago, but you were announced sometime before that.
Yeah.
How were you spending that time getting ready?
Yeah, well, I was still provost, so I still had a full-time job. I had kids, have a wife, right? So there was all those obligations. But really, from the outside, I spent every week I was spending time about 4 to 5 hours a week in the mornings before work or in the evenings, interviewing people that were alumni, Board of Visitors members, elected officials, county commissioners. I mean, it was. I got the chance to be almost in your seat, kind of asking the questions that I wanted to learn about the area, and everybody was wonderful in terms of providing information, being very candid and open about things that they saw as opportunities and what they saw as challenges. So it let me get to know the community before I arrived. I dove into the data, of course, because I'm a scientist, so I love my data. And I got to know the numbers around the institution. What's different is that positioned me for some of my own strategy for my first year and opportunities for the institution. It allowed me to expedite the ground truthing of those thoughts once I arrived. So it was a lot of time, again, getting to know the community through Zoom. Love it or hate it, it is a new media that's going to stick with us forever. And again, getting to know that data and then getting to know the people around the data is more of a now.
And yet I could tell you're an enthusiastic person who's ready to go, yes. But you had to kind of arrive, and you don't want to come off as, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, right?
Exactly.
So that makes sense. You mentioned Zoom, remote learning. Kids who are coming into campus this year had a very strange high school experience. Some of your students who were freshmen in 2020 had a very strange first couple years of college. What are you seeing about how, I've talked to people at the Department of Education about that lag in early grades and everything else. What are you seeing among your students? I'm sure they're very happy to be present, but how did that change what goes on?
Since students only got back about a week and a half ago,
Too early to say.
I can't give you a Radford specific story, but a couple of things that I've learned talking to other presidents as well, not just in the Commonwealth, but kind of nationally, is that pre-pandemic, students really didn't like online, nor did faculty. It was just something that it wasn't a preferred mode of learning. And so when everybody flipped completely remote, there was a lot of frustration, again, from everybody. Just 2 years later, most of our students want some form of remote involved.
They at least want a portal that they can go to that works as well as the one that worked in high school,
True.
Right? They have expectations.
Absolutely, but they want the flexibility that came with remote learning rather than traditional class times. And now many of our faculty, including some of the faculty I've met at Radford, really like that environment. And again, they like the flexibility and what it offers to them. So now it's this it's not that we offer in-person classes and everybody's happy. We have to relearn what's the right balance to attract and engage and keep students to optimize learning. Remember, it's optimizing learning and making sure that they are placed well in their careers. Nobody has figured that out yet, and that's discovery that we have to go through at Radford as well.
Yeah, the ground's moving underneath your feet.
It is.
For sure. Now, you mentioned two things in that last statement that was about, students arriving on campus and then keeping them there. I know enrollment is always a concern.
Yes.
It affects lots of things you do.
It does.
And then once you get them there, you've got to retain them.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? I know that's a big topic.
It is, and the way I look at retention, that's the name we use for students that start their first year that continue into their second year. Okay, it is not a point of degree, but it's a measure of how likely those students are to stay through graduation. And for retention rates, every institution is striving to do better. As I talk to my colleagues in the Commonwealth, some of those have very, I will say, elite retention rates because they're the flagship institutions, and they still want to raise theirs. So everybody is being challenged with that. At Radford, one of the things that I recognized from that 7 months kind of getting ready for the role is that the way we supported our students, everybody was doing very good things, but it was across 4 different divisions. And there's been a shift nationally that you can document as you consolidate those functions together, that there's a positive impact on the retention of students. So as I came in, that was the one thing I came in with, Tom. I said, we're going to reorganize those structures into one entity. So we've created the Highland Success Center. Their goal is all about the success of our students. Focused, yes, on that transition as freshmen to sophomores, but then through to graduation. They are actually removing, they early on will be focusing on how to remove barriers for students, because surprisingly, as long as institutions of higher ed have been around, we've created artificially a lot of barriers for student success, and now we have to deconstruct that. So there's going to be a team working on that. So it is a focus for Radford to elevate those retention numbers for our student, because I want to tell a parent or that student, you come to Radford University and we are doing our darndest to make sure not that you just stay for your second year, but you stay all the way to graduation, because every student that doesn't, they're going back home with a different feeling about higher ed and sometimes with debt, and that's not where we want to be with students.
Right. This is a side question, but I don't want our time to pass without asking you about your the paint job on your Jeep. So okay. That was one of the first things you did, according to the newspaper article that I read.
Yeah, my wife and I. I love being part of universities, and in coming here, we learned that yes, there is a color at the university, but really their color is a tartan, okay? A nod to the Scottish heritage of the region. And we had debated about selling our Jeep in Florida, which we've loved. We've had it for 20 years. My wife was really pushing me to renovate it. I thought, oh, okay, so we agreed we'll renovate it as long as we can kind of make it university themed and add some tartan to it. So we've got it's a 20-year-old Jeep, a lot of history with it, but now it has a very distinctive mark that everybody identifies. And I'll tell you, as we drive into town and go into the coffee shop, parked out in front, people come in just to say hi because they know we're in there. Yeah, and I think that's lovely. That's why we're in a small town, right?
And yet also you have to be careful about, where you park it, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. I'm going to make sure it's always parked in a legal spot.
So Radford there's been a lot of change. When I go now, the graduate degree I did was largely online, but when I go to campus from my time going there in the 90s, there's been so much growth in buildings and infrastructure. Do you feel like it's in a pretty good place where that comes? I mean, do you need more buildings, right? Or what's the story there?
So we have 2 primary campuses. So the main campus, which is what you're talking about in Radford, we're finishing a building called ACAIC, the Artist Center for Adaptive Innovation and Creativity. It houses the arts and some of our health sciences for interdisciplinary learning. That building will be completed in fall 24, And then we really have every facility that we need. It is a beautiful campus with very little deferred maintenance. A lot of campuses, it's a struggle. Buildings are built, but there's not the funds to maintain them. The presidents, through time at Radford University, have done a wonderful job in keeping everything immaculately maintained. So you can't help but be impressed by that campus. We also have a campus in Roanoke.
Right.
On that campus, we have most of our allied health programs are at the graduate level as well. That's an area where to grow those, space becomes an issue. So we have a partnership with the Roanoke Higher Education Center, which allows some space. We're planning on doing some more purposeful partnership with Virginia Tech and their campus in Roanoke. In time, we will need facilities there to actually grow the number of healthcare graduates that we have. But that's the Roanoke area. Our Radford campus is just an amazing place to be.
That's great. And we could talk a lot about plans for Roanoke. As being a Roanoker, that's interesting to me.
Sure.
Unfortunately, that's our time. So I just want to say, as a proud graduate of Radford, I want to thank you, Bret, for making the trip to Roanoke to talk to me. As we close out the show, I just want to remind our viewers that in addition to airing on our main Blue Ridge PBS channel, all episodes of What It Takes can be seen on Echo, our on-demand channel focused on education, community, health, and opportunity. While you're there, I hope you'll subscribe so you can keep up with us as we continuously add new programs like this one. For What It Takes, I'm Tom Landon.